Let's switch gears. Our next guest has a new top prospects list up for the Baltimore Orioles at The Athletic. He, of course, an expert on these types of things. He is longtime baseball writer and analyst. Our friend Mr. Keith Law is back with us here on GCR. Keith, it's Glenn and Paul in Baltimore. It's great to chat with you as always. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
I know it had to be a very difficult decision for you as to who the Orioles' number one prospect would be. I can only imagine the hours that you spent just hand-wringing and wondering who you would put at the top of this list.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on that one, absolutely. Especially since he was already number one overall on the list.
Makes it really tough.
Sort of boxed me into a corner.
All right, Keith, I'm going to ask this question because I read your scouting of him, and I'm I can't help it. I'm always going to be nervous to some extent as someone who admittedly is a fan of these teams. I'm always going to be nervous that something that we say is can't miss actually can miss, or maybe miss is the wrong word because like Matt Wieters didn't miss. Matt Wieters was a hell of a baseball player. It's just that we thought he was going to be the second coming of the Messiah, right? How good truly is Adley Rutschman? Are we at the point where it would take almost divine intervention for him not to be a superstar for the next decade in this sport?
Well, he's a catcher, right? He could get hurt. Catchers just, they wear down, they develop back and leg, knee injuries. Lots of things can go wrong, certainly. And I have a lot of catchers towards the top of my prospect rankings this year. It's not just Adley Rutschman. It's Gabriel Moreno from the Blue Jays, Francisco Alvarez from the Mets, Diego Cartaya from the Dodgers. There's huge positional value in a guy who can really catch and also projects to do something at the plate, but I fully acknowledge that there's a lot of risk involved. And if something goes wrong with Rutschman, that's it. That's by far the most likely thing that could derail him.
Sure.
Is injury. It's not that he's really had much of anything so far. As far as we know, he's never had like a back or a lower half injury, but he's a catcher. It could just happen. I don't worry about the bat. He's really disciplined. He has plenty of bat speed. He has power. And I don't really worry about the catching skills. Obviously, you guys know the story. He's been catching basically his whole life. And his arm is fine. His glove is fine. And people love the makeup and love working with him. I think realistically, if he stays healthy, we sort of set that aside. What's the lower bound for him? It's that he's an everyday player, and that's kind of it, right? The upper bound is he's an MVP type player, that this is Johnny Bench, Carlton Fisk, somebody like that. But there's always a chance that he just hits a little bit less than we think, and the power is a little bit less than we think. Maybe that plate discipline that looks so good, and maybe it's just because he's really taking advantage of lesser pitchers, and when he gets to the majors, it won't hold up. I don't believe any of that's true. I'm just sort of giving you what's the lower estimate, and then what? He's a 2.5 to 3 WAR player for a bunch of years. Well, I mean, it's not what you wanted, but there are way worse outcomes. And I think you'd have to. I still think. How about this? I would absolutely bet he'll be better than Matt Wieters. Not because I'm saying this guy's so much of a better prospect, because I thought Matt Wieters was going to be a star, just like you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
But Rutschman's skill set is a little different, and I think a little more predictable. Like I feel more confident in some of the things Rutschman can already do, carrying over to his major league career.
Well, and I appreciate what you said in the piece, which is that even if he was a right fielder, his bat alone would still probably have him as a top 20 prospect, right? Like even if the position didn't, and his defensive ability, even if it was just sort of he was a middle of the road player otherwise, the bat alone would make him a top 20 prospect. And I think the danger here, Keith, we're looking at all this within the the guise of a rebuild, right? And it feels like the math to the Orioles figuring this all out without Adley Rutschman clicking at the level of being a true transcendent superstar is very difficult. That there's pieces here, and we'll talk about some of the other ones, but that if this is going to get to the full-on rebuild, if you're going to become maybe it's unfair to compare it to the Houston Astros, but clearly that's what they want to be.
Sure.
It's very difficult for that to happen without Adley Rutschman becoming truly star of stars.
I agree 100% with what you just said. And to extend the Astros comparison, which is perfectly fair because that's where this front office came from.
Right.
The Astros had some wiggle room. When Lunau and Elias and company all got there, and Sig as well, when they all got there, George Springer was already in the house.
Right.
There was no George Springer there when this group got to Baltimore. And then they had, they really hit on the high picks. They happen to pick first of all, they picked 1 3 years in a row. And then one year they didn't sign a guy and they picked 2. And they happen to be great years to have those high picks. They end up with Carlos Correa and Alex Bregman.
Yep.
Well, if one of those guys turns into a just okay player, not a superstar, Astros are still really good. If Adley Rutschman doesn't turn into a superstar, I would not say all hope is lost, but I agree with you. It is much harder to figure out how this team becomes a contender, especially in a more difficult division, without Adley Rutschman becoming a star.
It's exactly where I am. And it feels like an awful lot of pressure to put on one person. It's not his,
yeah, it does.
But I think that's the reality of the circumstances. I think it's particularly unique, and this is where I wanted to go next, because to me, the conversation has come up. I know your colleague Dan Connolly has written about it a lot, and he and I have talked about it ad nauseum. The conversation is almost lost about how there isn't a lot of top-line pitching prospects in this organization. That obviously there's Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall's there, but then it's a wild drop-off from there. Like, they are not loaded to do this pitching-wise. They have gone all in on bats at their early picks in the draft, and the pitching side of it just doesn't appear to be there right now for the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I have, obviously Orioles fans have made it clear they don't think I'm being sufficiently sunny.
No,
I've
never heard that about
no?
you.
Oh,
Yeah, I've never heard that, Keith.
Sorry to even bring that up at this point. But I think, I've pointed out, I think the points I've made, I hope my argument is well supported by evidence, right? He has not been pushed as hard, so to speak, as most pitching prospects in the minors. Grayson Rodriguez can usually walk to the mound and say, I'm not facing more than about 18 batters tonight. So I don't have to pace myself that much. And he's so strong, he could sit 98 for 75 pitches. Well, what happens when that's 100 to 110 pitches? Maybe he's exactly the same pitcher, in which case, great, best possible outcome.
Right.
But he's going to have to, at some point, start to face hitters a third time, start to turn a lineup over 3 times. And then you're going to need to see, wait, you know what? He's probably going to pitch with a little less velocity. And so that makes him lean a little more on fastball command. I think the breaking stuff has to be better in that scenario. We just don't know. And he's not the only one. Hunter Green has been similarly used carefully, but Hunter Green has an injury. And my criticism of the Orioles has been Grayson Rodriguez has been healthy forever. Unless he had some injury when he was in his early teens, I don't know about it. This guy he's the exemplar, right? He's exactly what you want. You take a big, strong high school kid, and then he doesn't get hurt, you won the lottery already. So I like Grayson Rodriguez, but as you said, he's it. Right? DL Hall, who I actually liked quite a bit more before he got hurt, well, he missed half of last season, and we still don't know if he's 100%. And I just went through my top 20 again to make sure I wasn't forgetting somebody. Who's the next clear starting pitcher in this system?
I mean,
I'm not sure.
I know the next pitcher on your list is Kyle Bradish, but that's what we're talking about, right? Like, and I'm not saying that Kyle Bradish can't. Once upon a time, who knew what John Means was going to become?
Absolutely.
Like there's always going to be somebody that we don't know is capable of being a very high level pitcher that becomes one. But assuming it is certainly not something you can do. And I think it explains part of the reason why the Orioles decided they needed to move the fences back in left field, because they just don't have the pitching coming, and they're gonna if this is going to work, they're gonna have to be able to sign a pitcher at some point, which they couldn't do when they had such a short porch in left field.
And so I honestly think I will disagree with you on one point.
Okay.
I think it doesn't matter where the fences are. If you offer the most money, someone's going to come.
Fair,
right? If they went out and
right.
offered Robbie Ray money to one of the starters this offseason, they would have gotten it.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying they should have, right? So there's a bunch of reasons why maybe they wouldn't. But I agree with your general point that they have made a decision in the draft, especially, that they're going all in on bats. Leaning college, but they've taken some risks on some high school bats. Kobe Mayo looks very interesting so far. I'm kind of optimistic about that one. There are hitters coming. I do not worry about this group's ability to put together a contending championship caliber lineup, and I do think they probably have all those pieces in the system right now. With considering what we talked about with Adley Rutschman, I don't know how you put together a championship caliber rotation from what's in the system, and so then you're either signing those guys or you're trading for them. And we don't know yet. We just have not seen this organization get to a point where they said, we're going to package together some of this incredible position player depth that we have to try to go get some pitching.
That's the reality. I mean, 100%. We are in lockstep when it comes to that. Keith Law is with us from The Athletic. We'll link up his top 20 Orioles prospects on our Twitter account at Glenn Clark Radio. If you don't have a subscription to The Athletic, you're an insane person. Keith, obviously, I think the sort of the great unknown is the Heston Kjerstad thing, of course, which, there was some question even when they drafted him about where they drafted him, as obviously they went under slot, and we have no idea what to expect him, and I appreciated the fact that you sort of acknowledged that when you addressed him. If Heston Kjerstad comes out and we know there's going to be a minor league season, and he's hitting the way we expect him to hit, if within a couple of months we see that bat come back, where would he be on the Orioles list, on your overall list, if you had 3 months of Heston Kjerstad looking like the player we expected him to be before the myocarditis?
Probably about where I put him coming out of the draft, which was towards the back of the top 100.
Okay.
This is not Colton Cowser. Colton Cowser can really hit, and Colton Cowser did get the benefit. He went out right away, and he hit. And he's, we have more evidence now. We have much better data on Cowser, especially going out, doing it in a full season league, wood bat, across the board. I feel very good about Cowser's status. Whereas Kjerstad, for folks who don't remember, there was a big question at the time how good the hit tool was. He was very much a draft. First of all, he was a draft pick to try to save some money so they could go get Colby Mayo and Carter Baumler in the 4th and 5th rounds with the savings. He was also very much an exit velocity draft. He does hit the ball extremely hard, but he strikes out a lot. He struck out a lot in college. He was close to 30% in the SEC in his last season, his last full season, I should say, in college. And so if, just going off what you said, if he hits like what we expect, that's probably what you're going to see. Say that he spends a good chunk of the season at Double-A. He's going to hit the ball really hard. We're going to have great exit velocities. There will be power. I would not be surprised at all if he struck out 30% of the time in pro ball, especially because it's a transition to a wood bat, and the poor kid's missed basically 2 years. Even if he is physically 100%, and I really hope he is, he's just not faced live pitching in so long at this point. It's got to probably by the time he gets on into an actual game, it'll be about 24 months since he's played in a real game, maybe even a touch more. That's a long time to go without facing real pitching in games that matter. And I feel for him. I'm not criticizing him. I'm saying this sucks for him, but we've got to be realistic. He's going to be rusty, and it may take a long time to shake that off.
You mentioned Colby Mayo. Is there anybody else in the system that Keith, you feel like you're higher on than other people necessarily are?
I didn't think I was higher on Joey Ortiz, but just going off of what Orioles fans have come back to me with since this list went up earlier this week. Several people on Twitter and in the comments have said, wow, you like Joey Ortiz more than I realized. I also thought maybe they were just remembering. I did not like Ortiz at all. I saw him first summer out when Aberdeen was still short season, RIP to the New York Penn League. And I was like, he's not good. It's weak contact. And he was just okay at shortstop. But I was like, it doesn't matter. This bat is not going to play in pro ball. He looked very much like, obviously he went to a school in New Mexico, right? Huge hitters park, great environment for hitters. Then he comes out pro ball, moves to wood, not playing at altitude. Well, there's nothing there. To Ortiz's great credit, he changed his swing with the help from Orioles player development. He got a lot stronger. And I saw him I think the first game of the season, actually, or certainly the first series of the minor league season last year, and was even sitting with somebody from the Orioles front office who said to me, oh yeah, he is because I said, did he change his swing? He looks completely different. And they said, yeah, he is a different guy. Sure enough, I think it's absolutely, I think it's real. I think it's sustainable. I actually said at the end of the prospect rank, at the end of the Orioles rankings, I'm not going to predict he makes the top 100 next year, because if he hits like that, he should be their shortstop by the middle of the season. He should actually graduate from the list, because I think he's that ready. And who's blocking, right? They have
they have nothing. Yeah, 100%. Right.
Yep.
Right. Oh, it is the area where there's the most opportunity. There is no question about that whatsoever. Keith, have you started thinking about the draft for this summer? Obviously, it's relevant here in Baltimore. We're assuming the Orioles are going to have the number 1 pick, of course.
Right. No, I think I would actually, knowing very little about what's really being discussed in the CBA, my guess is if there are significant changes to the draft, they'll put it in for next year.
That's what I would think.
You really shouldn't be changing. That wouldn't be fair to anybody.
Right.
And to answer your question, yes, I'm going down to Georgia on Monday, at the very least, to see Drew Jones.
Okay.
Depending on weather and schedule, if I can get Tamar Johnson on the same trip, I will. Otherwise, I'll just go back. Obviously, these are two of the top 5 players in the draft. They must be in the Orioles' decision set. It will be very interesting to see, though. This is not a good crop of college position players, and that's who the Orioles
Yep.
want to take when they pick in the single digits.
Yep.
Other than maybe Brock Jones at Stanford, who I don't know if he's really their preferred type of college position player. He's more of the toolsy athlete, a little less of the high performance, great batted ball data. Not that he doesn't have that, but he's a little bit of a different profile. Do they just say, you know what, we're just going to, if this is a high school hitter year, we're going to take the best high school hitter that we see out there? Or do they try to get creative again with the money?
Can Brooks Lee be in the conversation at all there?
Brooks Lee, I think that's a stretch.
Okay.
I don't think so. And I actually know exactly what weekend I'm trying to go see him, because they don't match up against a lot of good opposition, but they've got one series where he might see some good pitching.
Okay.
I think he's more of a 10 to 20 type pick.
Okay.
And maybe he gets pushed up because he's a college guy, right?
Right.
Like, there's always a flight to the safety of the college player in the first round. I don't think he's 1-1.
Okay, I can understand. Look, I think you need to get a transcendent talent when you have a 1-1. I completely understand that. Like, you have to get somebody, an Adley Rutschman type, and if that requires you to go to high, the weird part again is the timeline, right? Like, drafting a high school bat right now does not seem to fit with the timeline of Adley Rutschman coming to the major leagues this season, right? Like, that's the awkward part about all of this conversation. But at the same time, I don't think that can lead you just taking a player for the sake of it. You have to get the transcendent talent that's available.
I mean, could you get one name we didn't mention is Cam Collier, whose dad, Lou Collier, was briefly a sort of major league bench player in the late 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. Cam is in a junior college, and he's 17. Now, obviously, we know that this group, and they took Carlos Correa, who's 17, and that was a major reason that they leaned towards him. But if Collier is the player we think he is, he might be the guy who's in the big leagues at 20. And he could be, and I think he's a little bit more advanced as a hitter than like Drew Jones or Elijah Green, who's at the IMG Academy in Bradenton. I have no particular reason to say that the Orioles would take Collier, but I could see them giving him some extra points in the model for his youth and for this idea that he's a good enough hitter that he could move more quickly than your typical high school player. He and Tamar Johnson are the two guys who might just hit their way to the big leagues before they turn 21. Okay,
that's interesting. All right, Keith Law, at Keith Law on Twitter, of course, The Athletic for all of the rankings. What else can I plug for you? The Inside Game, anything? What can I get a plug in for? You've been really good to take the time for us this morning.
Sure. The Inside Game, my second book, Smart Baseball, is my first book. They are both out in paperback now. Smart Baseball, more just about baseball stats. The Inside Game, try to tell some interesting, weird, funny baseball decision stories through the lens of behavioral economics and cognitive psychology. Both out in paperback. I recommend folks, if you have an independent bookstore near you, they could really use your business. The pandemic's been very hard on places like that. And if you don't have one, I love bookshop.org, which also tries to support independent bookstores through every sale.
Excellent. Keith Law, really appreciate taking the time for us this morning, sir. Thanks so much. We'll talk again down the road. All right.